Hi, this is Kevin Bonham, and this is video 5 in Inkscape for Scientists. In the last video, we talked about making some slightly more complex shapes and talking about how nodes and edges work together to create the shapes that we see. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit more about making shapes in a slightly more practical way, in ways that are maybe a little more symmetric or that have some nice properties if you're making cartoons or you're making diagrams for presentations or for posters, etc. So let's get started. So here I have an empty diagram. I've pulled up the Align and Distribute panel, which is going to come in handy later. If you don't have that, it looks like this, this little button down here. Oh, I'm hiding it with my camera. Let me move that. So it's this button here. It looks like a couple of bars of the line. And then the other panel that's going to be useful is the Fill and Stroke panel here. So if you don't have that, again, it looks like this little paintbrush on the side here. All right, let me move my camera back to the corner. All right, so in this video, I'm just gonna make a sort of diagram of a receptor and its ligand binding to it. I did this in an Illustrator tutorial a long time ago, and this will show off a couple of different things: the pen tool, the node selection tool, and a couple of different path interaction tools that we'll talk about here in a moment. All right, so first, let's make the cell itself. I like to start off using sort of garish colors so we can sort of see the shapes that we're making. We can adjust that later. So I'm going to select this sort of brown color, and then for the edge, I'm going to just make a green color. This will look terrible, but it'll help us in a sec. So I'm using the pen tool. I click and hold, and now I'm going to hold the control key. That gives me the ability to make a straight line. If you recall, there's modifiers that you have for a lot of different tools that will help you sort of make slightly more regular shapes. So if I hold control, I can make this nice straight line, still holding control, and I'm just clicking, not clicking and holding, but just clicking the points together, and then I'll click the last point, and then we make our edge there. The stroke is not particularly thick, so let's make that a little thicker just so we can see it a bit better. Okay, now I'm going to go to my node selection tool, and as we showed before, if you select an edge and click and drag, that allows you to make a sort of rounded edge here without needing to tweak the nodes individually. So here we've got the nice outline of a cell. I'm going to move it down maybe a little bit, holding control again to sort of keep it in the same vertical orientation. Didn't like where that bottom is, so I'm going to now select both of these nodes so that I can move them up together. And again, if I hold control, it lets them come straight up like this. I could also use arrow keys to sort of adjust more directly, but I like clicking and dragging and holding the control key. All right, so now we have our cell. I'm going to come over here to the layers panel now, and I'm going to take this path and I'm going to lock it. And what this allows means that I now can't select this anymore. So when I'm playing with individual components, I'm not going to accidentally move my cell out of the way. All right, so now I'm going to make a receptor. So to make a receptor, I'm going to use the rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw here a sort of skinny stalk for the transmembrane domain. Hold control and mouse wheel to zoom in a little bit. If you recall, if we have the node selection tool here, we can change the roundedness of the edges here, but I don't feel super strongly about this, so I'm just going to leave it about like that. And then for the top, I'm going to use an ellipse, and I'm going to intentionally sort of draw it a little off-center to show about alignment. So I've got these two objects. I really want the head of this receptor, the ligand binding domain here, to be in line with the transmembrane domain. And so I'm going to select both of these. You can hold Shift to select multiples. And then I'm going to come over here to Align and Distribute. And I've got lots of options here you can play around with, but I'm just going to use this center on vertical axis. And right now you can see here where it says relative to, it says relative to page. I don't want that. I want it relative to the last thing that I selected. So we're going to have it relative to the transmembrane domain, so I'll select that, then select the transmembrane domain, and when I align along the center axis, or on the vertical axis, you'll see the sort of head group jumps over to be in line here. So that looks nice. And right now, these are two sort of separate objects, so I could group them together. So if we do this, you can either do Control-G or you can find the group icon over here. And what this does is it means these will, if I select them, it sort of moves them, selects them as a group. If you look into the layers panel, what you'll see here is that this group of the receptor is made of two separate paths, a circle and a rectangle. These are individually selectable, so I can either double click and then I can move things individually, or I can come over here to my layer panel and select the individual objects. But I don't want these to be a group of separate objects. I want these to be a single object. So I'm going to ungroup them, Control-Shift-G, or the ungroup icon here. And then I'm going to use a path tool. So if you come up here and you come to path, you see there's a bunch of different options here. The one I want here is union. So this is Control+. If you want to know the keyboard shortcut, what this does is this converts these two individual paths into a single path. So you can see that sort of part of the ellipse disappeared, and this has now been converted into a single path. If I go back to the node selection tool here, all of these individual components are part of the same object, which can be very nice. Sometimes this is what you want, sometimes it's not. But I like to have things like this as a single object rather than a group. It keeps the lines and the fills nicer, and conceptually it just makes more sense to me. I'm going to use the node selection tool here to make this a little bit more mushroom shaped here. All right, so now I've got my receptor. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a ligand. And I'll just make a star to make it clear. Oh, I've got these weird things from the last video. I'm going to make the spoke ratio 0, roundedness 0. That's actually, I do want a spoke here. Okay, let's do it like this, and oops. I've got some weirdness going on here. There we go. All right, sort of a classic star here. And now this is going to be the ligand. And what I want to do is I want to create a pocket in the receptor that is precisely shaped for this ligand, and then still have the ligand around. So what I'm going to do, once I've got a ligand shape that I like, I'm going to duplicate it. So Control-D, or you can right-click and duplicate. And what that does is it just creates an exact copy. Because this one that I'm going to use to create the difference in the receptor is going to disappear. So again, we could center these two using the alignment panel if we wanted to, but I'm not going to bother right now. I'm just going to select both of these. And then I'm going to come up here to path, and now I'm going to show you difference. So what happens there is it cuts out a pocket. Again, this receptor now is still a single object where that star came in, but that pocket is now perfectly aligned to the shape of this ligand. So now I could do a bunch of other stuff. I could come back and I could adjust individual features if I wanted to. But I just want to show off a couple of the other path objects in case they're useful. So, and I'm actually going to change, this is a thing I talked about in a previous video, but I'm going to change the selection. The default for Illustrator is that if I am overlapping shapes at all, it selects them, and that's what I like. It's different than some other software like PowerPoint, but we can adjust that with this little icon here with the selection tool. So just to show off some other path properties, so selecting, this is causing me problems now. You should obviously play with these to see what you like, but one that is kind of interesting is intersection. So you can see just the overlapping portion now is created as an object. We can also do division, which is kind of interesting. This now divides the bottom shape by the top shape. And now these are two individual objects, so you can sort of make puzzle pieces. I once did a thing where I made a cell that was undergoing apoptosis by like doing this division and sort of having puzzle pieces that I then rounded out to make it look like the thing was coming apart. So that can be useful. I'm just doing Control Z now to undo. One more, the last one that I want to show is fracture. So this is the same as the overlap piece, except that all of the individual shapes remain, but now I have the separate pieces of the two originals and where they were overlapping. So you can do this to make all kinds of complex shapes if you have more shapes. So I'm going to duplicate this here. If I select all of these now, aside from the star, path, fracture, you can see all of the individual pieces now come apart, and I have the individual components. So this is quite neat. You can use these different path features to do a lot of different stuff. So experiment around, try it out, and see what you can make. So in the next video, we're going to talk a little bit more about the align and distribute panel and talk about making some actual scientific figures. So see you in the next one.